Game of Thrones finale shocker, a song for the trade war, and what can happen when a Chinese company owns an American dating app. That and more on this week's China News Headlines. Welcome to China Uncensored, I'm Chris Chappell. This week's China News Headlines. After 8 years, Game of Thrones has come to an end, and I haven't seen a show finale create controversy like this since the end of Lost. But to everyone disappointed by how Game of Thrones ended, let me tell you, you should at least be grateful that you got an ending, because fans in China did not. Chinese censors blocked the finale on the Tencent web streaming platform. Why? Because of technical difficulties. That is, technical difficulties with the US-China trade war. Yeah, China restricting Game of Thrones was a terrible idea. Game of Thrones is one of the most popular shows in China, with the season being viewed more than 550 million times on Tencent Video during the most recent season. That decision is going to make millions of Chinese people finally realize they're living under an authoritarian regime. I mean, sure, Tiananmen Square Massacre or whatever, but people have been waiting 8 years for that series finale. What's that, Shelley? Chinese people just watched the pirated versions of the finale. Okay, yeah, I should have seen that coming. Unlike the ending of Game of Thrones. Of course, with the US-China trade war heating up, the Chinese regime is launching an all-out propaganda campaign, like accusing the US of bullying China. But sometimes the official propaganda organs need a little help from the people, which is why a retired Chinese official wrote a catchy anti-US trade war theme song. Wow, Mr. President, pack it up. The US can't compete with this level of bad karaoke music. Trade war is set to the tune of an anti-Japanese song from the 1960s film Tunnel War, in which a Chinese town defends itself from invasion. The song went viral in China, getting over 100,000 views on WeChat. Wait a minute, 100,000 views on WeChat. WeChat has 1 billion users. 100,000 views is not viral. This is starting to sound like a setup to get unwitting Western media to report on the song. But the trade war isn't just being compared to the fight against the Japanese. My favorite Chinese state-run media, the Global Times, is comparing the economic trade war to the actual Korean War of the 1950s. And you know how that ended. Maybe some in the US believes that the Korean War was a draw, but if you know the history well, you will understand it was a symbolic military victory of China against the US. Yes, nothing screams victory like sending wave after wave of Chinese troops to their death to force a draw. But that's not the perspective you'd get from watching Chinese movies about it. According to Radio Free Asia, the Communist Party's propaganda department issued an order requiring CCTV to air anti-American movies every day during prime time. Most of them were set during the Korean War. The films portray North Korea as a righteous nation and the United States as an evil imperialist, and contain scenes of Chinese soldiers opening fire on their American enemies. Not a bad strategy to turn the Chinese people against America, except of course for one small flaw. You banned the finale of Game of Thrones! There have also been calls on Chinese social media to boycott US products. This strategy worked when China and South Korea had a dispute a few years ago. But then messages suggested boycotting McDonald's and KFC. And Chinese people were like, nah. Meanwhile, a Chinese embassy official tweeted the reason Trump hates the Chinese company Huawei. It's that the Huawei logo looks like an apple cut into pieces. There are two things that make this tweet slightly unfortunate. One, he's using Twitter, which is banned in China. And two, he made the tweet on his iPhone. Now that's truly cutting. But perhaps more US companies should be banned from working with China. For instance, Grindr, the gay dating app. It's owned by a Chinese company. Well, according to a Reuters exclusive, Grindr's Chinese owner gave some Beijing-based engineers access to personal information of millions of Americans, such as private messages and HIV status. Talk about the potential for blackmail. The Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S. has now told the Chinese company to sell Grindr because they consider Chinese ownership of the app to be a national security risk. I wonder why. Of course, not all U.S. companies are having a hard time in China. Oreo is doing quite well, thank you. I mean, it's basically the cookie version of the yin-yang symbol. But more specifically, they will be releasing 6 new flavors of Oreo cookies, including Chow Joe-style barbecue pork pastry and honey red bean cake. Sorry folks, those flavors will only be available in China. And a promotional video for Oreos has gone viral. It shows the Palace Museum at the heart of Tiananmen Square being made out of cookies. Unfortunately for the company, the Chinese Foreign Ministry released a statement saying the video proves Oreo has been part of Chinese territory since ancient times and has seized control of the business. From now on, Oreos will only be red and yellow and taste like the bitterness of the struggle against American imperialism. Former Vice President and current presidential candidate Joe Biden has been criticized on the campaign trail for being soft on China. And now, reports are questioning his son Hunter Biden's ties to China, including how he managed to become a very rich man at the same time his father was negotiating with China. That's according to the 2018 book Secret Empires: How the American Political Class Hides Corruption and Enriches Family and Friends. The vice president is negotiating a bunch of very sensitive issues with the Chinese, including the South China Sea, trade, tech transfer, etc. Shortly after they return to the U.S., Hunter Biden's firm receives a $1 billion private equity deal from the Chinese government. And according to The Intercept, Hunter Biden's investment company in China, Bohai Harvest RST, has invested in facial recognition technology that's being used to monitor Uyghurs in Xinjiang. Nothing to see here, folks. But not everyone is so thrilled about the Chinese government. A local Fox News station in Los Angeles got a hold of undercover footage of Falun Gong practitioners being abused in Chinese labor camps. I can't actually show it to you because YouTube would probably age restrict or demonetize this video, but I'll provide the link below. They did an excellent 9-minute report and I encourage you to watch it. And Canada is sending a delegation to China to appeal for the release of 2 Canadians. The 2 Canadians were accused of spying, but it's much more likely their detention was retaliation for Canada detaining Huawei CFO Meng Wanzhou. They've been in jail for months, but the delegation might not do much good. According to Canada's former ambassador to China, the relationship has gotten so bad, Chinese leader Xi Jinping won't even pick up a call from Trudeau. The hardest part for Trudeau? Wondering when he'll get to hold those pandas in his arms again. What a tragic loss for all people kind. In a sign that maybe Hong Kong isn't doing so well, 2 Hong Kong activists had fled to and were granted asylum in Germany. The 2 pro-democracy activists were involved in a 2016 protest that turned violent. They jumped bail and turned up in Germany, recently disclosing they were granted asylum status. One of them said, "If the German government thinks that the Hong Kong judiciary is independent, they would not grant me refugee status. It's because they think that Hong Kong uses the judiciary to persecute Hong Kong people." This, of course, is happening as Chinese officials are really encouraging Hong Kong to pass new extradition laws. The laws would allow the easy extradition of people from Hong Kong to mainland China. The kind of laws that would, I don't know, make 2 Hong Kong pro-democracy activists feel like they need to flee the country because they won't get a fair trial. And that does it for this week's China News headlines. But before you go, it's time for me to answer a question from one of you, a fan who supports China Uncensored with $1 or more per episode by contributing through Patreon. Today's question comes from Joel Detroit. May I have China Uncensored's permission to appropriate Pepe the Pooh in social media? Ah, Pepe the Pooh, one of my favorite creations from the show, and a great illustration by our video editor, Seamus. It's a horrendous/delightful mashup of Pepe the Frog and Winnie the Pooh, creating the ultimate in China meme trolling. Anyway, yes, you have my permission. Spread Pepe the Pooh far and wide to the deepest corners of the internet. Fill the 4chan forums with it, even 8chan. Tweet it, Instagram it. This is China Uncensored's gift to humanity. Treasure it. I've put a download link in the description below. Thanks for your question, Joel. And thanks to everyone watching. We could not make this show without your support, whether it's supporting us through Patreon or just watching and sharing the show with your friends and family. So thank you from me and everyone on the China Uncensored team. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.